When we talk about energy, we usually think of oil. It is fair to say that oil makes the world go round. An economy stops without oil. Most people are plowing money into AI and Bitcoin ETFs, when really I think that they should be investing into energy ETFs. And in this video, we're going to talk about 3 energy ETFs that you might want to hold on to before World War III starts. So number 1 is XLE, the Energy Select Sector Spider Fund. XLE has a dividend yield of 3.1% with an expense ratio of 0.09% and a 5-year return of 13.81% after taxes on distributions. So when we're talking about why XLE, out of all the options out there, well, 1, it's been beating the S&P 500 for the past 5 years, and 2, it's involved in every single vertical. When you're talking about oil, it does it. Gas, it does it. Consumable fuels, it does it. Energy equipment, it does it. Services, it does it. So whether you're talking about drilling for oil, getting that oil processed, getting that oil to the pump so you can pump it into your car, it does it. That's the reason why I wanted to invest in this ETF. That's the reason I'm looking at it. So guys, it's important to take a look at where the world is going. With the petrodollar agreement expiring and Saudi Arabia and the Middle East seemingly making more alliances with Russia, and with President Biden seemingly threatening Saudi Arabia and OPEC for their lack of oil production, we have to take a look at where we're at. It makes sense that both oil and energy prices are going to continue climbing. And if Biden gets another 4 years in office, we know exactly where to invest. So number 2 is FENY, or what I like to call FENY. That is Fidelity's MSCI Energy Index ETF. And to be honest, they hold much of the same stocks as XLE, except their expense ratio is 0.08%. and their dividend yield is 2.86%. Their performance is basically the same as what we saw with XLE. Makes sense because they hold much of the same stocks. The only difference is I consider these guys a bit cheaper than XLE because they're not willing to pay as high of a dividend as we see with XLE, even though they're performing the same. So the sad part for the US consumers are the gas prices. I remember moving from Canada to the US, Alabama actually, back in 2016. And I remember that the roommate that I was staying at that time was gracious enough to pick me up from Birmingham Airport to drive me to the house. And I remember seeing the gas prices back then as $1.76 per gallon. And I thought that was expensive. But fast forward to 2024, this year I moved to Texas and I sold my car. But I still do look at the gas prices every now and then, and I realize that they're $3.76 per gallon, and I think that is cheap. And we all know that to go anywhere in the US, you basically need a car, unless you're living in New York or something. Or if you're doing monk mode like I am, where you just sell your car to avoid all the distractions so you can focus completely on your side hustle. But even when you do that, you might find yourself, like I do, on Perplexity, asking strange questions like how much oil does the US produce and consume in a day, which is 13.5 million. So the US produces 13.5 million barrels of oil per day. But get this, you think that's a lot, but the US consumes 19.7 million barrels per day, which means that there is a 6.2 million barrel shortage of oil. So how do they get that extra oil? Well, the US goes ahead and imports that deficit. So number 3 is SCHD, which is Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, and they have MER, an expense ratio of 0.06% and a dividend yield of 3.4%. So it's much better than FENY. But when it comes to being exposed to energy, it really is only Chevron taking basically 4 of the 13% of the holdings that they have in energy. Their performance is a little bit worse than the other two, to be honest, because what we've seen in the last couple of years is that oil and energy has been rising like crazy, and since SCHD is more diversified, they're not completely exposed to that. It makes sense that their performance is a little bit worse than XLE and FENY because those two ETFs have been completely dominating, completely killing it because they're fully exposed to oil and energy. So SCHD is more diversified. They're actually more heavy into finance, healthcare, consumer industrials compared to energy. And if you're a risk-averse person like I am and you want to spread your eggs into multiple baskets and have diversification, then SCHD is the way to go. Heck, I still consistently buy SCHD compared to any other ETF. And of the three that I mentioned, SCHD is really the only one that I hold. Though I am considering buying XLE just because I want to get more heavy into energy. And I think that there's going to be a shortage when it comes to oil and energy in the near future. So I want to get more exposure to that sector. So what we learned is that oil is the real currency for the world economy, and that the US must pay in order to import oil to meet their deficit. But what we do know is that Saudi Arabia and Russia, they're not exactly great friends of the US, right? Russia especially. And the world has recognized that the US can't really be trusted after they went ahead and sanctioned Russia. If they sanction Russia, that means they can also sanction you at any time. So if I was Saudi Arabia, what I would be thinking is that, do I really want to sell US more oil for dollars when I can get sanctioned at any time? And US dollar is a bigger risk than in the past nowadays. I mean, what happened in the past was that countries would get paid in US dollars and they'd go back and take those US dollars and buy US treasuries, right? Risk-free investment. But I think with rising geopolitical tensions, sanctions, and a devaluing USD, that's pretty risky. So if Saudi Arabia is not going to sell US more oils, then what's going to happen is that US will continue to have a shortage. And we know that when supply falls and demand rises or stays the same, the only place that price can go is up. In layman terms, gas prices will go higher, gas will get more expensive, and if you're owning the top 3 energy ETFs, you will get richer.